My university has tunnels connecting all of the buildings on campus. I've been told by my friends from other places this is pretty unique. But I think a lot of schools around here have them. Maybe they just want to make sure students don't have an excuse to miss class when wind chill reaches 50. Maybe they don't want us all to starve if a blizzard lasts a little too long. In any case, these tunnels crisscross under the outdoor sidewalks and green spaces of our college, guiding students, staff and faculty alike wherever they need go. Most of us who live in the dorms use them daily in the winter months, even if we might eventually pop outside occasionally for some fresh air. I don't think anyone wants to brave the elements for their ATM class when they don't have to. Though, the tunnels are not uniform in their construction, and some are absolutely sketch IER than others. Some are made up of aging plaster walls, poorly lit with burnout construction-style lamps, inexplicably always damp. Most of the shittiest ones go between dorms and parking garages or cafeterias, places they knew they could cheapen out as much as possible. Some of the dorms aren't much better above ground either. The place I want to tell you about and its tunnel is one of them. Let's call it Gray Hall so I can maintain some attempt at anonymity. This shitty dorm must have been hastily and cheaply constructed in the 80s. It always leads, and had walls so thin you could hear your neighbor as if they were speaking directly to you. Honestly, I get the sense that this building has been begging to be torn down practically since it was new, and the last 40 some odd years has not done anything to help that. Blizzards, minor floods, a few rough hailstorms. Gray Hall has seen the worst this state had to offer. It's probably a miracle they squeezed the years out of it that they did. It took first a student breaking his wrist in the stairwell when they lost their footing on a cracked step, and then another one managing to push out a window and fall from the 4th floor before the university finally stopped using the building altogether. As far as I know, the kid that fell is still in the hospital. There was just too much maintenance needed all at once, and the university couldn't risk any more lawsuits or bad publicity. So they closed it completely after the fall semester. I think they were also tired of addressing all the complaints about it. Everyone hated living there and would escape given any chance they had. By that point, there were probably only a dozen students living in the entire massive thing, and heating it during January probably wasn't worth it either. They closed the only tunnel to Gray Hall before they finished moving all the students out, and said it was the most structurally unsound part. I'm sure that's true, but there is more to it. More that I wish I didn't know. More that I wish I could just forget. If I weren't a senior here, I would have dropped out already and driven as far away as possible. I can't tell the world. I gotta graduate. But I can at least tell you. I live in the next dorm over, so every day I kept walking past the large barricade they'd placed at the entrance to the unusually long tunnel to the condemned hall. It always looks like overkill to me. Why was there a tarp-hung floor and a ceiling like it was some kind of construction zone? I was certain they were trying to scare us away. I guess it was pretty successful. Well, for most students. Not me though. I'll admit maybe there is something wrong with my instincts. But the only thing I felt each day was a growing sense of curiosity that was harder and harder to ignore. On a Saturday night a few weeks ago, I made my first mistake in a series of poor choices. I tried hard liquor for the first time. Half a red Solo cup full of vodka later, and my inhibitions were eroding by the second. I was at a small party with my friends just off campus, and everyone was at least a little bit tipsy. One of my friends had the bright idea to play truth or dare. A lot of the game was spent licking nasty shit, making people embarrass themselves. And of course there were a few raunchy moments between players too. One of my friends, Mike, who happened to live in the same dorm as me, claimed my dare later in the game. Dude, you've been wondering what the deal is with that abandoned Great Tunnel, haven't you? I caught you staring at it last week, and I thought for sure you were casing the joint. You were looking for weak spots to break in. I shrugged and tried to take a casual sip of vodka, somewhat unsuccessfully. I mean, yeah, of course I do. It's so menacing. For like no reason. There's gotta be more than just a crumbling hallway, right? Well, I dare you to prove it, Mike said, slapping his hand on the ground with drunken enthusiasm. I rolled my eyes. I'm not gonna die 'cause some loose brick falls on my head. Even drunk, I'm not that stupid. That made a few of the others laugh. But my friend wouldn't be deterred. Okay, we'll put on like gloves and our biking helmets. Will? I pushed. Well, yeah, now I want to know too. And I'll make Jim come along. My friend's groggy roommate looked over at the sound of his name. Wait, what? He asked blearily. Mike playfully smacked at Jim. Come on, idiot. We're going on an adventure for Rachel's dare. Jim groaned loudly. but I'm so comfy. Mike started tugging him to his feet. Well, that's just too fucking bad. Get up. It took a bit to find all that we would need to pry our way through the barricade, given that we were still inebriated. However, a few folks at the party decided to help us out. One even lent Jim a spare helmet when he realized he'd left his at his parents' house. We left the party crew cheers of encouragement. But as we stepped into the cool evening air, quiet surrounded us for the first time. It left us each in our own silent contemplation as we crossed the street onto campus. What if security catches us? Jim asked softly. I could only shrug. I guess we gotta make sure that doesn't happen. I can keep watch. Mike volunteered. I couldn't help but laugh. I don't know, Mike. I think you might need to sober up a bit more first. Mike crossed his arms over his chest but couldn't refute that. When we got to the blockade, we debated how to get through without making our intrusion immediately obvious. It took a bit of awkward scrambling and teamwork, but we got through without tearing down the tarp that covered most of the entrance. Mike was the first one on the other side. He blindly fished his phone out of his pocket and put on the flashlight. When Jim and I joined him, we each did the same in turn. Scanning the walls and ceiling, it was clear that the tunnel really was pretty badly in need of repair. There were cracks and missing plaster everywhere. Dramatic holes in the ceiling and several lights were broken. This tunnel had always been a little spooky, but illuminated only by our phones, it was downright unsettling. This tunnel tilted slightly downwards because Gray Hall's basement was lower than the ones in the buildings around it, and that night it looked like it could be a tunnel straight in hell. It seemed my fear had finally caught up to me. I closed my eyes and took a few deep breaths. It was then that I noticed a horrifying smell. I grimaced and turned my head away for a moment. Mike had already started walking, so he was now a few steps ahead of me. All three of us were now completely silent as we crept carefully forward. In my head, I told myself it was because we didn't want to alert anyone we were down here. But I knew they were just as scared as I was. We were quickly nearing the end of the tunnel where it joined up with Gray, but there was a slight turn before that happened. Mike reached it first. He stopped dead in his tracks, gasped and frantically scanned the ground with his phone's light before falling backwards, shrieking. That wasn't a sound I'd heard him make before. I rushed forward to see what he was looking at. There, below a broken concrete ledge, in shallow devote in the ground, was the torso of a rotting human body. My brain could only process the scene in pieces, and at the beam of my phone's flashlight lay at least 3 bodies, all dismembered, some horrificously contorted, their skulls stiffed in silent screams, and blood stained every last scrap of clothing that was visible. One was an older woman. One was an older man. But the third was a guy who was young enough to be in one of my own classes. I stumbled backwards like Mike had, but tripped slightly in dropping my phone. It fell screen side down, causing the light point upwards and illuminate the entire shallow grave before us. Aside those first few bodies, which were probably at most a few months old, lay fully skeletonized remains. Their clothes looked older, like way too old-fashioned and weathered to be from any time in the last few decades. What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? I muttered, frantically shaking my head, as if trying to clear my addled drunk thoughts like an etch-a-sketch. I heard Jim retching a few steps away over my shoulder. Mike was now shakily trying to scramble to his feet. We gotta get the hell out of here, man. We have to go. We can't be here. Holy shit. He stammered incoherently, still staring at the corpses before us. He finally turned, and as he reached me, he shook my shoulder. "NOW. We have to go NOW." He was shouting. I was also struggling to avert my eyes from the crime before us, but I did manage to lean down and clumsily retrieve up my phone. As Mike began to sprint away, I forced myself to turn and follow him. I could hear Jim only a step or two behind me. Our exit over the barricade was not as graceful as our entrance, and it was now pretty obvious someone had gone through it. We barely had the sense to care. We paused for a minute in the better-lit intersection of the tunnels. I can't go back to my room. My roommate. I don't know what I'd say. Where the hell do I go? I met first Mike, and then Jim's eyes for the first time since our discovery. They looked at each other and seemed to silently and instantly come to an agreement. "Rachel, come to our dorm. I know someone with a cot we can borrow if you want. Just, please, stay with us, at least tonight," Mike asked. The weight of his words were heavy with fear and concern. I swallowed and began to nod my head. looking at Jim again, who attempted to offer an extremely half-hearted smile. "Let's go," was all I could say in response. We started to head down the tunnel that lead to our dorm building, but as I passed by his staircase, I stopped dead in my tracks. "Actually, you guys, can we walk outside? I know it's cold, but I didn't need to finish that thought, as my friend seemed to be relieved I had thought to offer an alternative to staying down here any longer. The night outside barely seemed dark to us, now as we trotted anxiously towards our home for the school year. The sounds of the late winter night were faint but still reassuring. Luckily, Jim and Mike lived on the first floor, so it didn't take us long to get in and collapse. I perched on one of their desk chairs, bring my knees up against my chest as I hugged my legs. There was a long, heavy silence as both boys sat on the floor nearby. Jim spoke first. "You have to tell someone." I nodded mechanically in response. "Okay, but like who?" "Anyone could have done that. Security. A professor. Another students. I don't think we can trust anyone." Mike sounded frustrated, and it was clear paranoia was starting to set in for him. That question and observation inspired another extended pause full of dread. Those people weren't all killed at the same time. Jim was quieter as he spoke. "Do you think it was a whole group of people that did it? Like a secret blood cult frat or something? Like as a ritual once every few years or something?" Mike asked. I couldn't help but snort a brief barking laugh. Mike's head snapped in my direction as his glare shot daggers at me. I put my hands up defensively. "Sorry, dude. I don't mean to like shit on that theory. It's just, this whole thing is so cosmically fucked up and unbelievable. It feels completely unreal. Like, sure, why not a blood cult fraternity? Anything is possible now, I guess." Mike sighed. "I shouldn't have dared you to do that. We could still be shit-faced at that party. Just doing stupid shit like licking a toilet seat instead. I still probably would have thrown up." Jim offered. That made Mike and I laugh for real in a way that genuinely eased the tension a bit for the first time. "Maybe we should figure it out in the morning. We could try to sleep. Or at least rest," I proposed half-heartedly, knowing deep down that any time I actually closed my eyes, I would probably only see those pale, bloated faces from here on out. I clicked and sure, but Jim agreed with me. We decided to turn most of the lights off, but kept on a single desk lamp. I was sure the boys would tease me for asking to have a little more light, but they seemed just as reassured by the idea. It wasn't possible to get the cot that night, so they tossed me a few extra blankets and I made do. I balled up my sweatshirt as a makeshift pillow, and just stared up at the ceiling. Luckily, it was already almost fram by that point, so daylight was only a few hours away. I must have managed to doze off at some point because I woke up to Mike swearing again. As memories of last night began to return to me, I felt myself paralyzed by dread. "Rachel, I saw you open your eyes. Come on, you gotta check your email." I groaned loudly, and with a lot of effort, I managed to force my arms to move. "Mike, can we I don't know, grab some coffee or something first?" I asked, desperately hoping to delay the inevitable. Mike shook his head as he clambered down from his bunk. He shoved his phone in my face, and I blinked a few times before grabbing it. On the screen was an email that appeared to be addressed to all students. It was from our school's president, and the subject line read, "URGENTSAFETYALERT." The email went on to describe a break-in at Gray Hall. Anyone with any leads could report them to campus security in exchange for more dining dollars. Any staff or faculty perpetrators would be fired. Any current student perpetrators would be expelled. And any former student perpetrators could have their degrees revoked. The school was already working with local authorities, and if the school's punishments weren't already enough, anyone caught could face jail time. The message was clear as day to me. "We know that you know, and you better keep silent." I threw the phone back to Mike and curled up again. "Does mean they already know about the bodies?" Mike asked, still in disbelief. I just shrugged. "I don't know, Mike. Maybe they knew about them all along." He furrowed his brow. "What do you mean, Rachel?" "I mean, you know the rumors as well as I do. They only closed Gray Hall to avoid more bad press. I don't know that they actually care that Daisy or Iswak got hurt. So what do we do now then?" I shrugged again. "Pray we can still graduate. What if they kill someone else? Someone we know? What if they kill one of us?" I looked him in the eyes and replied in a cold, deadpan voice, "Well, then I guess I hope whoever finds me under the concrete is less of a coward than I am. I'm a med student. I was just meant to observe. Maybe nothing in our textbooks or training prepares you for this. I'm writing this from my locked bedroom as something he moves around my house like an animal. Only quieter. More intentional. Please. Someone tell me what to do. I don't know how long the door will hold. It started 3 weeks ago. I'd only just begun my first rotation in internal medicine. I was shadowing my supervising doctor at Street Thomas's. He was sharp, old school, always wore a bootie and never seemed rattled. I looked up to him. Still do. The man didn't blink during a code blue, but he'd always said, "It's the quiet ones you watch closely. Not the screamers. The ones who smile when they shouldn't." I didn't get it at the time. My first solo case, just a basic consult. But my supervising doctor let me take the lead, was a man listed as patient 46B. Mid-30s. Slight build. No emergency. No urgent flags. Just unexplained bruising. He sat calmly in the consult room. No obvious injuries. Pale. Thin lips. Brown hair that hung limp. Like it had given up. But his eyes, that was the first thing. They were gray. Not blue-gray or hazel-gray. Just gray. Unsettlingly blank. Like a fogged-over mirror. He spoke slowly. Politely. His voice slow and toneless. Said the bruises started appearing 3 months ago. Inner thighs. Upper arms. Spine. Places you'd expect with abuse or a bleeding disorder. I examined him. And yes, there were bruises. But they were wrong. The edges weren't purple or yellowing like healing ones. They were pitch black. With a red core. As if something inside was trying to get out. I remember asking if he was on any blood thinners. He said no. I asked about substance use. Alcohol. Anticoagulants. Never touched a drop. He replied with a smile that felt like someone else's mouth wearing his face. I was unsettled. But I had to write something down. So I chalked it up as possible immune from obsipation. Gave him a mild corticosteroid prescription. And told him to return in a week. We'll run more tests. I said, probably nothing to worry about. I regret those words. When he returned a week later, things escalated. He looked thinner. Same dark clothes. Same blank expression. But there were more bruises. His neck now, around his jawline, and several across his scalp like blotches of ink. He didn't sit this time. He stood in the corner of the consult room, facing the wall, like he was in timeout. "Lucas?" I asked. That was the only name he'd given. "You okay?" "I can hear them now," he whispered. "And the walls? They want out. But they like you." I glanced at the mirror, wondering if this was some elaborate psycheval trick. But it was just me. Alone. With him. He finally turns. His pupils were dilated, almost consuming the irises. And there was blood under his fingernails. "I don't scratch," he said, as if reading my mind. "They move around inside me. I'm not doing it." I referred him to our liaison psychiatrist. I also requested a follow-up with internal. Something didn't add up physically or mentally. "We'll get you seen again soon," I told him. "Just hang in there. Okay?" He nodded. "You should lock your doors more. Especially after dark. You're sore. Mom. They'd like to wear you." The next day, I visited the psychiatrist's office to check in on the referral. The secretary looked up, confused at first. Then her expression shifted something quieter, tinged with sadness. "He hasn't come in. You haven't heard?" "Heard what?" She hesitated. "He was found dead. Last night. Blood and in his office. Police think it happened after hours. We're closed today for." I was already walking away, ears buzzing. I didn't want to believe it was connected. Couldn't be, but I felt it in my gut. I called the station, asked to speak with the detective in charge. I got bounced around until someone finally took me semi-seriously. "Yes," the voice on the other end said. "We're looking for a patient. Mid-30s. Gave the name Lucas. Used a fake address on the intake form. No ID. We're advising all staff at Street Thomas's to stay alert and avoid contact." The detective lowered his voice. "We found things. And drive. P's office. Blood in places it shouldn't be. Symbols carved into the carpet beneath his chair. And something. Under his fingernails. Not human. That was 12 hours ago. I've been trying to act normal since. I finished my shift early. Told the nurse I had a migraine. Took the tram home, looking over my shoulder the whole time. And now this? I came home and the house was dark. I live alone, in a 2-story terrace. Usually it feels cozy. Not tonight. I locked the door, flicked the hallway light on. He was there, not standing, on the ceiling, pressed against it like a spider, barefoot, clothes torn, skin to pale, almost translucent now. The bruises had overtaken his limbs, crawling up his face and broken, inky veins. But it was his expression that paralyzed me. A smile so wide it stretched unnaturally, as if his cheeks were tearing from the force of it. His eyes, they were solid black now, not just the irises, all of them, like two obsidian marbles reflecting my horror back at me. He didn't speak. He just moved, not like a person. His limbs twisted at angles no joint should allow, slow and jerky like a puppet handled by someone who's never seen one before. He crept across the ceiling toward me. I wanted to scream but couldn't. My throat locked up. I stumbled backward, hands shaking. Keys fall into the floor. He dropped. No sound. Just thud. Right in front of the door, blocking it. Standing there now, head tilted, arms hanging limp, still smiling. I ran, bolted up the stairs, locked myself in the bedroom. I barricaded it with a chair and a shelf. I don't know if it'll matter. He hasn't spoken once, but he's knocking now. Not on the door, on the walls. Knock, 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 and silence. Then knocking from the other side of the room. Swear to God I heard him giggling. I called the police. They said they dispatched someone but there's been a surge in emergencies. Said it'll take 30 minutes minimum. I tried to explain that a patient might have killed a psychiatrist and is now in my house. They said, try to stay calm. Sir, maybe step outside. I can't. He's everywhere. The lights keep flickering. My phone battery's at 9. I can hear him moving in the ceiling above me now. Sometimes dragging something. Sometimes whispering. My name. Over and over. Dr. Yar. There's a scratching coming from inside the closet. I didn't check it. I didn't think to. Wait. Oh God. The closet door just creaked open. It's pitch black in there, but I can see something moving. Long limbs. That smile. He was never downstairs. He's been in here the whole time. Please. Someone tell me what to do. I'm posting this in case I don't make it. The cops are 20 minutes away now. My bedroom door just creaked. UPBATE. Noises have stopped. No knocking. No whispering. Just the silence. I think he's waiting. If you read this, please share it. And if a patient with gray eyes, blood under his nails, and bruises that don't he lever walks into your clinic run,